Hi guys, it's Dan from Wellness Academy. Welcome to today's show. A fantastic show in store for you today with Jess Uffindell. She is a nutritionist and a proponent of functional medicine. Some really, really great takeaways. I got a lot from today. Have a notepad ready. Enjoy. Jess, welcome to the Wellness Academy podcast. Thank you very much for being here with us. I wanted to start off with you giving us an idea of why you ended up being a nutritional therapist.
Sure. So it's a little bit of a long story. So basically, probably towards the sort of later years of school, so sort of my early and late teens, I started struggling a little bit with sort of mental health, just a little bit to begin with. And sort of by the time I'd reached the end of university, this had gotten a lot more severe. And I ended up getting diagnosed both with depression and attention deficit disorder, which was kind of, I guess, just a collection of symptoms that I had at that stage. I mean, there's lots of different sort of ideas that people have about these, particularly ADHD.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I ended up being put on some quite strong medication, which at the time I kind of felt was sort of the answer to my problems. It certainly solved a lot of problems to begin with. This would fast forward a couple of years later, and I was anything but well. I'd lost a lot of weight. I'd lost interest in sports, food. I'd lost a lot of friends. So, whilst it had solved a lot of problems, it had caused me a lot more. So my rather sort of despairing parents were obviously trying to push me in a much healthier direction. And my dad actually ended up persuading me to do this fitness challenge. It was a 90-day challenge, sort of encompassing both a diet, a daily workout, and also education. So it was a really kind of, looking back now, it was quite basic education, but it was, all new to me about nutrition and health. And yeah, within about 3 weeks, I'd seen an absolutely huge change. I'd stopped taking my medication, or I'd very much made a decision like, right, this is going to be the way forward. So it was a real sort of 180. And it was basically the effect that this huge change in my lifestyle had that made me decide, right, this is something I'm much more than just slightly interested in. I'd like my career to be in this. I'd been working in film for about 2 years. I'd studied film at university.
Okay.
And yeah, I pretty much quit within a year, my job, and decided to go back to uni to study it. I also got ended up being employed by the same company that did the fitness challenges.
Okay, cool.
And I still work for them. So I sort of slowly have been built up over the years studying nutrition, a lot of experience as well working with people through fitness as well. So yeah,
cool.
Long story short, I discovered the power that nutrition had over your health or over my health, and I decided that I wanted to make it a career.
And you told me before, when we were speaking before doing the actual podcast, that you were interested in sport before being diagnosed.
Yeah. So
you had a change. Went from I really like sport, and then either the depression or the ADHD or the medicine changed you.
Yeah. So,
or at least that aspect.
It was a pretty sort of profound change that the medication had. So before I was diagnosed and put on medication and everything, I was still interested in sports, but by the time I'd sort of got to my university years, I found all of it, motivating myself for all of it, very difficult. I found keeping fit difficult. It wasn't something that came easily to me as it did when I first got into it. Yeah. So I used to play lacrosse quite competitively. Okay. And I did all the way through university, but yeah, basically once I started being medicated, it had basically, the medication for ADHD is stimulants. So it's essentially, it's amphetamines, which is a recreational drug as well.
Yeah.
So they deplete your appetite. They make you. They can create this kind of hyper focus where you're just able to think about one thing. Or that's the effect that they had on me. And so I would just, and they also caused insomnia.
Wow.
So essentially, not eating, not sleeping. The last thing you're going to want to do is go out and join your friends for a game of lacrosse or a run or go to the gym or anything. So my life just became pretty one track minded. I just became all about the work that I was doing, and there were, ironically, it gave me a lot of time that I hadn't had before to really sort of read around and focus on things that I'd never really been able to develop an interest and a knowledge around, perhaps because of my, the way that my brain had become over time before that. So, ironically, I believe that sort of my time spent medicated was actually part of what allowed me to become well in the end, because, as I'm sure we'll start to talk about, that being well, certainly in my view, is an all-encompassing thing. And so to understand myself better and understand, supposedly my condition better, allowed me to sort of start to take the steps necessary to become well and, eventually start
I'm curious as to how your dad convinced you. So if you were in such a place where, I think you might have talked to me about this before, and I either meant to ask you and didn't, or didn't, and forgotten what you said. But how did he manage to make you do something which you confessed you had no interest in?
It's a good question. I've got to think back. I believe at that point, whereas when I first started taking the medication, it really felt, and to other people, it really felt like, well, this is the answer. She's a different person. She's getting up. She's motivated. She's doing this. She's getting her essay done before the deadline. It's all these things that seemed like a really good thing to begin with, but slowly, because these drugs are addictive rather, the darkness that comes with that, started to overtake the good things. And as anybody with addiction in their past will tell you, the lows are really low. And you just don't want that in your life. Okay. So I believe by the time, I must have just been ready for it. I think when you get to a point where you've experienced enough difficulty with a certain way of doing things, and I guess I'd realised that this was not going to work. You alienate a lot of people when you're stuck in that sort of addiction. So,
so you had some level of desperation.
Oh, for sure.
And your dad
there's no
happened
question
to come at the right kind of time. I'm sure he probably came to you on more than one occasion. You've just said, you were ready to hear it at that particular
Definitely.
time.
And it was an open offer, that he said, look, because he had done this challenge and it had changed his life. Okay. Those effects.
What's the name of the place that you now work for then?
It's called Kenzai.
Kenzai?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was kind of an open offer. I can't remember what the time frame was before I actually eventually did it. But and that's actually not to say that it wasn't like all of a sudden, things were better. That was very much the decision, and I was off my medication for a bit, and then I'd go back on it for a little bit, and it wasn't an easy sort of immediate transition, but that was certainly the key turning point.
Okay, so that obviously gave you, at least from your point of view, a clear, I've done this versus a medication thing. And I think it's probably important, I believe, sitting and talking on a medium that can reach lots of people, that we're not advocating go and do a fitness challenge rather than take medication to solve your problems. But at the same time, you're a firm believer like me, I think now, that you can make a positive difference to your health, both physically and mentally, with a decent diet and exercise and lifestyle choices, right?
Yeah, so no, I did it very much alongside medical advice. So no, that I guess because of, you know, the nature of what my illness was, you know, I was able to manage it. Well, and now I'm able to manage things without medication.
Do you notice anything still? Nobody can train all the time. Like, you know, we go on holiday, we get ill in normal ways, you know, cold or whatever. We can pick up niggles, we can prioritise family or work or social activities. Sometimes, you know, hopefully we always come back to our fitness practice as such. But I'm guessing there are times where you've gone without in terms of training or the ideal diet. Do you ever notice things creep back in and you have to go, oh, okay, I've slacked off?
Yes, definitely. So certainly with any form of training and generally with, you know, my day-to-day diet, it is very much like I'm intrinsically motivated. Like I know I need to do certain things because it makes me feel well, and I'm just one of these people that needs to make probably more of an effort to feel good.
Yeah.
However, I think a key difference between, you know, I look at it pre that sort of moment, you know, 3 weeks into that fitness challenge where there was a real moment of clarity, was beforehand there was a sense of desperation and lack of control. Like I didn't know why I didn't feel well. I didn't feel that it was within my control. After that and ever since, I have felt I'm able to. I've got the reins in my hand, however loose they are. You know, I can always rein them back in, and I think that's the key difference.
Cool. So one of the things that we then talked about prior to meeting today was, and I'd never heard this before, but I do really like it because of the way that you described it to me. So I like to do my very best to take proactive control over my health and fitness. So if I have an upset stomach for a length of time, okay, well, what can I do to control that without it being some medication that I'm then reliant on? Because every medication has side effects, like good ones and bad ones. You know, you take some paracetamol, pain relief is a side effect of paracetamol, but then there's also a big list of other side effects, aren't there?
Sure.
I like to try and do what I can. So if I've got a headache, drink more water, if that makes sense. And from my understanding up to this point, the term functional medicine that you work with is trying to take as much control over your health as possible.
Yeah, certainly I think that comes into it. So, I mean, so the definition of functional medicine, as I would put it, would be that, well, it's a model of medicine basically. So it's a roadmap, if you like, with which we can look at a person's body, well-being, condition, whatever, and try and approach it from the perspective of, right, what are the root causes of this person's health concerns, whatever they might be. So essentially, if we look at a traditional model of medicine, that will look at the symptoms, for example, and that might prescribe a drug or some form of treatment that will target those symptoms. In functional medicine, we look more at mechanisms. So we'll look at the reason behind the symptom. Okay. So, for example,
if I come to you with high blood pressure, if blood pressure doesn't work, but you hear often,
it would work, but I think there's quite an aligned view both on the traditional side and the functional side. You know, it's very much a lifestyle kind of condition. Yeah, that's not to say we can't look at it from a functional perspective, but I would say, you know, most doctors would recommend, you know, weight loss, changing the diet, reducing the salt. These are things that we all know, right? So to look at, well, I mean, we could use me as an example, you know, with my ADHD. So essentially, this was a diagnosis based on a number of symptoms. So there would have been a number of tick boxes that I would have had to have fulfilled in order to get this diagnosis. However, a functional perspective would say, okay, well, what are these symptoms that she has? You know, lack of motivation, lack of concentration, brain fog, all of these things, and it would attempt to look at what it possibly might be this lack of motivation, and it might go. We might actually look at the my sense of purpose, my spiritual wellness. That's looking right out, sort of outside of the physical. Brain fog, we might think, okay, where's this brain fog coming from? We might go and look at the gut health, because we know that one thing that can cause brain fog is something called leaky gut syndrome. That's what we like to call it. So it's like this increased permeability in the gut, which allows toxins to come out that we know can go cross the blood-brain barrier and cause, sort of foggy thinking.
Okay.
So little things like that. So whereas the conventional model would say, okay, she's obviously got a lack of dopamine, which is what causes, which gives us sort of motivation. It's the reward hormone or neurotransmitter. The functional medicine would look at sort of perhaps why perhaps this, I'm not feeling the effects of the dopamine. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it takes a more sometimes individual approach to your symptoms rather than trying to perhaps clump it all together.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll break, what conventional medicine might label as a disease. It will break it down into parts and say, okay, this is what is happening in this person.
Okay.
How can we approach this and hit it at the root cause?
If somebody's at home and they want to go and see somebody, or they want to do that kind of thing, we talked about before, and you at very least brought with you to be able to reference as such, because I remember seeing it when you showed it me for the first time, and there's a hell of a lot on there, the functional medicine tree.
Yes. Would
you say this is something that people at home should download, so they can have at least an understanding? Can you go to your doctor with that to say, I want to go at this approach? How do I do that if I...
Yeah, it's a good question. So functional medicine is very much a developing... Well, it's pretty new in this country. Yes. And certainly if you walked into your GP with it, you'd be very lucky to have a GP who would know about it and who would be willing to work with it. That said, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, who's done BBC's Doctor in the House, he does an amazing podcast. He's a GP and a huge advocate for functional medicine.
Okay.
So, they are around.
Can you talk us through some of this?
Sure. So, essentially, the functional medicine tree, it's a tree. And if you think about it, it's basically an analogy for a person. So, at the bottom, you've got... I'm going to have to...
Yeah, go for it. And what we'll do is we'll probably put this in the link at the end of the episode for anyone to download or look at online. It's a pretty... generic thing, even though you'll probably find a million hits on Google for it. But pick it up, go for it. Yeah,
sure.
Definitely.
So at the bottom you've got the roots of the tree. And going into those roots, you've got what we would look at as all of the sort of environmental, the inputs into your health. So we've got, going from the left, sleep and relaxation, exercise and movement, nutrition and hydration, stress and resilience, relationships, networks, trauma, microorganisms, so things like bacteria and viruses, and then environmental pollutants on the right. So essentially these are all going into the roots, in whatever way that they might be.
So our day-to-day life is like the soil, the roots of the tree.
Yeah, and all of these, so going up, so the next layer up, we've got our genetic predisposition. So it's our DNA that we're born with. Yeah. And all of these, the idea is that all of these things going into the roots can affect your DNA and can affect the expression of your genes, basically. So we've all got, a number of different genes that will, cause certain different things. Might cause a certain disease. I've
got the one that means you're more likely for ankylosing spondylitis.
There we are.
So I can't remember which one it's called, and the amount of times that I've been to go, and it kind of fits in with the functional medicine thing. I went to see a chiropractor because I had neck pain, and he made me, I think it was the third time in my life at the time that I'd been sent to the doctor to get the blood test, and each time it's not come back positive. But it fits with that model of modern medicine, perhaps, and then go and see a different guy from a functional medicine perspective, perhaps, and it's, you're really tight because you hold a lot of your stress in your upper body and your neck, hence the tightness. Yeah. So it's understand a little about the idea that some genes that we have can be, I don't know the technical term.
Well, we just say switched on or
switched
off,
on,
basically.
and some won't.
Yeah, and we know that the environment, and when I talk about environment, I mean like anything, the food we eat, the stress that we allow ourselves to, or the stress that we're faced with.
Yeah.
Our exercise.
Which is a stress, right?
Well,
it's a stress on the body, isn't it? Like a positive one.
Well, it can be, it can be seen as a stress, but all of these things basically can switch genes on and off, and can affect the way that our genes are expressed, day to day. So then moving up, I'm conscious of spending too long.
No, but it's cool. It's an understanding, definitely.
So moving up from the genetics is something we talk about a lot in functional medicine, which is antecedents, triggers, and mediators.
Okay.
So these are things that firstly predispose you to a certain disease or symptom or something. So it might be smoking, for example. It's, a very classic antecedent to lung cancer.
Okay.
Just to put it really
bluntly. Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
And then triggers. So that might be something like a nasty bout of food poisoning. Really traumatic car accident, something that might trigger a change in your health.
Okay.
And then you've got mediators, which kind of fit in with both. So things that might be perpetuating a certain condition. So, for example, a food allergy. So say you're lactose intolerant and you don't stop eating ice cream, that sort of thing might be mediating.
Okay.
So then moving up, these are all things from the roots going up through those three things that I've just talked about, can affect basically the systems in your body. So they can affect the way that we digest our food, for example, the way that we repair our muscles.
Okay.
It can affect this. So it talks about structural integrity there on the right. So, all of that could... if I have a particular interest in gut health, for example, so if the gut isn't healing properly and there's a structural lack of integrity there, that can again move a bit further up the tree and start to cause signs and symptoms, and that's in the main part of the up through the branches.
And the signs and the symptoms are the leaves.
Basically, I mean, or whether there are signs and symptoms,
because they're not, not always.
But basically, up here we've got the different systems in the body. So we've got endocrinology, so that's our hormones, cardiology, so that's obviously the heart.
I'm guessing with this then, though, what you will do is you will focus on what you can control.
Yes.
Which is those
things
8
at the bottom,
or 9 things at the bottom.
Exactly.
So if we think about like functional medicine and this tree, I think 2 of the things I've become more aware of personally, one recently is sleep.
Yeah.
And understanding that, like I learned recently that deep wave sleep is where our body repairs itself. So for example, if I want to train at the gym 4, 5, 6 times a week and I want to recover as best as I can, I'd better be going to sleep by 10 o'clock and sleeping my best through till 2, because I learn that deep wave sleep happens more in the first few hours. But obviously there's 8 or 9 things there. So I mean, what are the easiest for you to help people control, do you think? So
as a nutritional therapist, obviously my main interest will be in the food. But you have functional practitioners. You obviously get functional doctors who are able to, or they're able to diagnose, which is something that no other functional practitioner is able to do. You'll have functional psychologists, functional dentists, literally anything you can think of. There will be ones that take a functional perspective.
Do you think this is where is medicine going this way?
I think so, yes. And people who are proponents of functional medicine, are seeing a paradigm shift.
Okay.
I don't feel it as much in this country as perhaps in the States or even Asia, Australia.
Okay.
But it is definitely becoming bigger.
So let's say I come to you and I want to cover my bases. Maybe I've not got any specific problem right now, but I'm aware of functional medicine and I'm on board with the idea that I personally can do as much as I can to take positive control over my health. 3, 5 things? What would you tell me to do? And we've all heard some of them, but treat me like an alien coming to planet Earth for the first time. I want to cover my bases.
Sure.
3 to 5 things. What am I going to do?
Okay, so as a nutritional therapist, probably the first thing I'm going to look at is how much processed food have you got in your diet.
Okay.
So that's things like white refined carbohydrates, so white bread, white pasta, cakes, sweets, takeaway meals, things that basically obviously haven't grown on a tree or that kind of thing. So these are things that we know often contain a lot of calories, a lot of sugar, salt, things that your body essentially isn't getting anything but too much energy from.
Okay.
And in nutrition, if we take something away, we always want to replace it. So if I'm taking away sort of your processed ready meals, your McDonald's, whatever, I'm going to want to replace it with fresh, unprocessed food. And the majority of that is going to want to be vegetables.
Okay.
So I guess that would probably be my second takeaway, would be eat more vegetables.
Okay.
Simple as that. And it really is as simple as that. It doesn't matter if they're organic. It doesn't matter if they're local. Great if they are, but it really doesn't matter. Essentially, if you eat more vegetables, you're going to be getting so many more health benefits than I could list.
Okay. And you like the idea, because we talked about this, of the rainbow.
Yeah. So that's a really, particularly when we talk about gut health, which is what I'm particularly interested in. By having it's a really easy way of including lots of different types of nutrients in the diet. So if we have, think about different vegetables of different colours, all the way from like white, brown, red, green, yellow, orange, blue. We could all think of things that are all different colours. And what we have in all of these different foods is a wide range of different fibres and also a wide range of different phytonutrients. So these are basically just chemicals in plants.
Are these the things that, again, so I'd heard about this, and knowing that you were a nutritionist and the functional medicine thing, I felt like it tied in. So I was like, somebody I actually know personally to ask this about. Yeah. I've heard this idea about certain plants that we eat, that they face on a daily basis the fight for survival. Same as the rest of us in a way, right? Which I know our fight for survival in a significant percentage of planet Earth is no longer the fight that it used to be. We're not running away from saber-toothed tigers, a lot of us now, but plants are still facing that fight because they're attacked by ABC animal, right?
Sure.
And they develop a natural defense mechanism. Am I correct in saying that that's the phytochemical thing?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So, and that's where your idea of sort of organic food being a little bit more nutritious comes from. So, essentially, if we think about a grape, if a grape is grown in a sort of heavily watered, pesticide-ridden environment, it doesn't really have to work very hard to survive. Okay. It just kind of survives. Compare that to a grape that's grown on a really harsh, dry landscape with lots of, critters around to attack it. That one has to fight to survive, right? So essentially, it creates these phytochemicals, and there are lots of different phytochemicals. We talk about polyphenols, for example, carotenoids, to name a few. Yeah. And essentially, one in a harsh environment is going to have a more concentrated level of these phytonutrients in it, basically to defend it from the harsh sun and from bugs. Yeah, whatever bugs. And it's these things that have a really positive health benefit for us. And interestingly, it's not actually us that is able to digest these polyphenols. It's actually our gut bacteria. Okay. So without our gut bacteria, these polyphenols would be pretty much useless to us. Okay. So when we eat them, our gut bacteria basically uses them and creates other chemicals which are then beneficial to us.
Okay, so it's our gut bacteria processing the phytonutrients.
Yes.
And it's the processing and what results from that process that is the thing that's beneficial to us.
Yes.
Okay. So we want that healthy gut bacteria then?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. How do we get it?
Going back to, I think we were talking about
different colours.
Different colours,
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And so what we know about gut bacteria, so I mean, going back a little bit, I think it's pretty common knowledge now that, you know, there are trillions of different bacteria.
And that most apparently things that we're told we can get, I've heard that you get advertised, I can get healthy gut bacteria.
Yes.
But they've only normally got millions in.
Yeah.
Not the trillions that we need,
exactly.
right?
Right.
So it's really hard to do that from a supplement. So we need a...
Right. So the easiest way for us to influence our gut bacteria is through our diet.
Yeah.
And the best way of doing this is by eating a wide variety of fruit and vegetables.
Okay.
So what we know is that we want what you want is a variety of different bugs inside you. So it's not just one kind that's good for you. We want a really vast range. And actually, over the past 100 years or so, you know, with the sort of development of the Western diet, we've actually lost a huge percentage of diversity in our guts in general. But the way to improve it is to eat a wide variety of different fruits and vegetables. These contain different types of fibre and different types of phytonutrients.
I didn't realise there were different types of fibre for a start.
Yeah, so there we are. There's lots of different types of fibre. We know that the bugs don't eat, your gut bacteria don't sort of survive on the same type of fibre. And if they do, they're doing it kind of sequentially. So one will sort of metabolize it once, and then they will.
There's less left over for the next.
Well, it's more that the other bugs will sort of get their energy from metabolites of what it's really complicated, and we don't.
Another podcast.
Yeah, we just don't know, to be honest. But we do know that they use a huge amount of different fibres and different phytonutrients, and the best way to influence them isn't by taking supplements. Whilst that I'm not sort of ruling that out as something that can be helpful.
Yeah.
But the best way is through our diet. Yeah.
Rather than okay. Wow. So whilst we can get away, your first step would be, if you're not getting enough coloured vegetables, eat as many different colours. So go for the red, the yellow and the green pepper rather than just the one, or go to the section that's got some of the vegetables maybe you avoid. Like, so if you don't get a lot of green, get some green. If you don't get a lot of white, get some white. Definitely.
And it can be even I love vegetables, and obviously I've been trying for many years to make sure that I'm getting everything I need. I think the more you know, the more you're sort of trying. But even I think a lot of people fall into routines with what they're eating.
Like our favourites.
You think, I'm eating vegetables 3 times a day, I'm fine. But actually, walking past something in a supermarket that you haven't seen before and you haven't tried before should be a trigger, really, to think, I should try that.
Okay.
And trying something new each week, I think, is a really good way of challenging yourself to improve the diversity in your diet.
Yeah, trying to take a moment to be conscious, which I know it can be difficult, because often people have been at work all day and maybe they do the trip to the supermarket on the way home and it's not. But like you say, if you see one thing new that you haven't tried before, give that a go.
Yeah.
Cool. And we talked about how gut health affects your brain in terms of feeling foggy, but you also mentioned to me about gut health affecting sleep. Yeah, so it's a great thing to move on to now.
Yeah.
Why should people care what their gut health is like, right? Yeah, so it's a really exciting science at the moment. It's emerging. There's a lot going on at the moment now with looking at how the gut influences the rest of our health. So from weight gain, obesity, diabetes, to heart disease, depression. We know that there's a really strong gut-brain axis. So people talk about gut bacteria influencing your mood, for example, and we know that it can. Okay.
And also your immune system. So if you're somebody that gets a lot of colds, for example, So that's actually 70% of your immune system is in your gut.
Yes.
So if you're somebody who gets a lot of colds or a lot of infections, you might want to start thinking, okay, am I looking after the health of my gut? You know, what is my digestion like? Am I getting enough vegetables and fresh foods?
Is there anything else on top of that? So like, we've talked about the vegetables thing.
Yeah.
But I can think for myself, for example, like people I know, my girlfriend is the main one. Like she bangs on at me more about green veg than I do. She even puts green veg, like broccoli. She loves broccoli with things that it doesn't belong with. She would put green veg and broccoli with an apple crumble if it meant getting more broccoli into your diet.
Yeah.
But she does suffer a lot more than me. So if vegetables was step one, and you had to be like, oh, okay, I really, as the nutritionist, I really want to make sure they're doing.
Sure.
Because if you say get some more green veg, we can all be like this, where we're told, okay, eat all different colours, and then like you said, we can go, well, I'm getting 3, so that's all right.
Yeah.
So if you had to make sure everyone was doing everything,
sure,
you wouldn't give them one thing to do, you might give them 5
Yeah.
or 3, because then they might do 2. But at least they'll definitely do 1.
Yeah.
What else, if you were going to try and improve your gut bacteria for all of these amazing reasons, what else would I do?
Okay, so the first thing I would do would be to remove the things that are feeding the bad bacteria. So, like I've talked about, the processed foods, your refined sugars.
Yeah.
Because that's just going to essentially, because whilst we have good bacteria, we also can become overgrown with unfriendly bacteria as well. So I would remove the things that are feeding those, and then obviously start feeding the good bacteria with your lots of different brightly coloured fruit and vegetables.
Yeah.
So the next thing you could do in terms of gut health, you want to take that step further. I would really stress, though, that the most important thing you can do is change your diet in terms of fresh vegetables. The third thing is you can start to introduce fermented foods. So that's
kimchi, sauerkraut.
So these things, kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir.
Okay.
What else? Kombucha, which is like a fermented tea.
How are you on apple cider vinegar on that? I've heard it's good for gut health. It tastes like death. So if you gave me a reason to drink it more, I would drink it. But if
it might be.
Okay.
I haven't seen, like, I'm not massively motivated to. I don't drink it every day. A lot of people love it. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
But fermented is step
the answer
3.
to apple cider vinegar.
Okay.
But the best research, as far as I know, with fermented foods is on kefir.
Okay.
So that is like, you can get. It's usually made with milk, but you can make it with anything. So you can actually make it with water, coconut milk, juice even.
Okay.
And it has high levels of a particularly friendly bacteria that we know is beneficial for health. And it's studies have shown that it's that the bacteria in the kefir actually make it to the gut. So there's a lot of skepticism about sort of, and rightly so, about how much of the bacteria in other foods actually ends up making it to the gut, because obviously it's got to go through a pretty treacherous journey through the digestive tract before it makes it to the large intestine where we want it.
Okay.
Particularly the stomach, which is very acidic. So not a huge amount of bacteria makes it through.
Okay. And is there anything, are there any obvious signs, both on the negative side, that would tell me I need to start paying more attention to this, but then also on the positive side? So if I'm like, this could be me, like I could need to do that, what would I look for? And then on the flip side, if I've been on this bit, how do I know when I'm at the good, like, does that make sense?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, the easiest place to start is, do you have symptoms? So, and these would be digestive symptoms first and foremost. So, IBS type symptoms.
Yeah.
I won't go into details, but yeah, I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So any kind of digestive symptom would be the start. Beyond that would be reactions to certain foods. So, do you feel you're not able to eat dairy or wheat or certain fruits, something like that? Particular sensitivities can indicate that there's an issue going on in the gut, whether the the lining of the gut isn't as healthy as it could be, whether you're missing certain digestive enzymes or the list goes on.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so that would be sort of step one, the easiest way of recognizing it. Certainly, if you're suffering from something else, any other condition that you don't understand the root cause of, 8 or 9 times out of 10, a functional practitioner will want to have a look at what's going on in the gut, either to rule out, some
gut problem
some sort of mechanism starting there.
Okay.
Largely because so much happens in the gut. If you think about like all of our energy and nutrients that create health come from our food, more or less, which obviously is absorbed and digested through the gut. So it's a pretty logical place to start in most cases.
But I think it's something probably a lot of people don't know, though, isn't it? Like the idea of how your gut health can connect to so much.
I mean, if I think back to me, going and seeking out this medication for my ADHD and thinking it was the answer to all of my problems, I hadn't got the faintest idea. I think people are much more aware now. This is, well over 10 years ago. But it's not something we really learn about in schools or anything like that. I think it's something that people in general have to go through difficulty and hardship with their own health. In general, that's the pattern I've seen with people who work in this field, is that they've kind of had to discover it on their own.
Okay.
Yeah. So symptoms would be the first one. Sorry, going back to your question. There are also a lot of, increasingly functional tests which are available to kind of test whether you have, a healthy gut function.
Yeah.
So these are becoming more and more sophisticated and really interesting. So there are breath tests you can do that will test for certain bacteria in the upper digestive tract, that's in your small intestine, which really shouldn't have any bugs in it at all.
Oh, wow.
And then there's stool tests, which will test for all sorts of different bacterias, parasites, viruses, but also markers of maldigestion, of all 3 macronutrients, for example. It gets so complicated, but really interesting. There's a lot we can learn from looking at the stool.
Before I ask you like the 3 questions,
Sure.
I know I've referenced to you before. One thing I am curious about. So, I tend to operate on the principle of so you've told me about this, getting the colours of the rainbow, right? You haven't given me every scientific detail about why that's important, but what's the worst thing that happens if I go and eat more vegetables? Nothing, right?
Absolutely.
So I may as well give it a go.
Yeah.
I tend to do that a lot, like be my own guinea pig. And I think, I remember one of the things that I'd spoken to you about, I'm sort of nicking one of your answers for a future question in a minute now. You credit knowing your own body well as being a positive benefit. And I know this is one thing that's massive for me. Like, would you agree that a lot of people don't know what it feels like to feel well because we so consistently don't hydrate ourselves well, fuel ourselves on coffee and stimulants, and don't necessarily eat the greatest diet? So you're operating at what you might think is a 7 or an 8 out of 10, but in reality you might be a 4 or a 5 if you know your own body. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
But how do you, as the person that not only has to understand what's going on, but why it's going on, and like you've already said, there's so much, like the consumer sees the story in The Sun or on Facebook or in an Instagram story, do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, there's a lot to understand. But you've got to understand that and the next. How do you try and stay on top of 1,000,001 things to learn?
So you mean when I'm faced with a client?
No, just in your own learning.
So I mean, there's constantly, particularly in my field, there's constantly new information out there. And I haven't been practicing for that long that I can, kind of sort of say that I've got the answer.
Yeah.
My approach is to start with the basics.
Okay.
Often, if you're working with a person or even with yourself, you don't need to come up with a really complicated plan.
Okay.
And often we ignore the most simple thing that's like stuck right in front of us. So often if you come across somebody who's trying to improve their health, you know, they're thinking, right, have I got the right percentages of this or that? And, you know, am I eating organic? And, have I you know, got the correct, I don't know, spring water from the right place, whatever. You know, these are problems which probably are not as important as the fact that, are they eating fresh, unprocessed food every day, you know, or 80% of the time? Are they exercising every day? Are they looking after their teeth? You know, simple, you know, are they avoiding alcohol? Are they not, you know, are they avoiding stress or taking, you know, taking at least some action against stress? Are they getting enough sleep?
Steps,
These are all things that we know influence your health so much more about all of the little things. Yes, all of those, you know, developments in science are really interesting and are important when we're looking at complicated health issues. But in terms of probably the average listener wanting to take something away, like, I think it's really boring advice. Like,
I've got a friend who is fantastic at, like, I've bought this sleep pendant which tells me how long I've slept, and I've got this ring that manages this, and then he is amazing at not watching what he eats. Like, you know, he'll order takeaway, you know, he's where there's a Deliveroo and has food all the time.
Yeah, and it's such a great way of distracting ourselves, right? Like, I think we're all guilty of it at certain times. You start tracking something, or you buy this great multivitamin which you think is just going to change your life, but essentially...
What's your opinion on them before we ask you the next bit?
Multivitamins?
Yeah, what do you think? Yes or no?
See, the cool thing about functional medicine is that, like, is that we would view everybody as an individual.
Okay.
So I would say in some cases they're great.
Okay,
in other cases probably not necessary.
Cool. I've heard people say, like, they're like the worst investment, but then I've heard people say they're the best. So I just thought I'd see what you said. Sure.
So I mean, but so if you were a woman trying to get pregnant, for example, you would be recommended to take a multivitamin with a certain amount of folic acid and vitamin D in it, for example. So there are situations in which they are, you know, medically advisable, and, you know, that's certainly not the only example.
That's cool. So, 3 questions.
Yes.
You have you gave me cool answers, which I like, but I want to hear what you think. So, physical wellness is a massive part of wellness. I think I even remember you saying that staying healthy / not being ill is a massive key to wellness, which I fully agree with. Physical health, therefore, is a big part of that. And whilst being a nutritionist, you are no doubt monopolised a lot with the idea of my nutrition. What about from a physical perspective? Is there anything that you do, a habit, a tactic, a routine, anything you make sure you do on a regular basis to look after that side of your life?
Sure, yeah. I'm not fanatical about fitness, but I do some form of fitness pretty much every day, whether that is just walking the dog or doing a full-on workout.
You're the second person to say that, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there we go.
Pets are a big one, I think, for a lot of people as well, aren't they? Like, they're doing more research now about how interacting with your pet can stave off depression, reduce anxiety.
That too. Yeah. Just like the action, I think, of stroking an animal, like, reduces your heart rate and your breath rate as well. And pets are a huge part of my joy in life. So yes.
And from a mental wellness perspective, what do you do? Like, I mean, ADHD has obviously been something big to overcome. And if you, like I say, we're also diagnosed with depression. Whilst on one side of it, there's your diet, what goes in here affects up here. Is there anything else that you think is really important to you to stay on top of from a mental wellness perspective?
Sure. So certainly in terms of those diagnoses, you know, my perspective on them is very much, they're not really part of my identity anymore, if you know what I mean. Like
100%.
I you know, when they were, I found it held me back, if you know what I mean. Like, it was a sort of a means to an end, I guess.
Yeah.
So in terms of mental wellness now, staying positive as much as I can, and also prioritising, so family, relationships, Basically
Good
those would be the main
balance.
things.
Yeah,
Prioritizing things. I've my family life is probably the main, and my relationships with my friends is probably the main way I maintain mental health.
What's really cool about that is I think that's often overlooked, isn't it? You know,
maybe.
Do I have good relationships with my friends and with my family? Because being alone doesn't equal negative mental wellness necessarily for anybody, but
no,
I know I function a lot better with positive relationships.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people would probably answer that with like saying getting my alone time, having my me time, which I get plenty of anyway. You know, I work for myself, so I do have me times. I'm lucky in that respect. Or like meditation, for example, that's another huge thing for people. But for me, I've found relationships are the main way of maintaining mental health.
Jess, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for
Is that
being
the
here.
end?
Near enough,
Okay.
yeah. So I know that, I think in terms of where a lot of your knowledge will stand, it's difficult for us to go deep into the weeds, isn't it? So we'll do this another time.
That'd
and
be great.
You can try and educate me a little bit more on the ins and outs of stuff, and definitely get people downloading the functional medicine tree. So thank
definitely.
you.
No, thank you.
So very much
It's
for
been
being
fab.
here, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.
This is Dan Ball from Wellness Academy. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you're listening right now. You'll find a link on the episode notes. Just tap or swipe over the cover art. You'll also see some offers from our sponsor, and we hope you'll support our show by supporting them. If you like what you'd heard, we'd love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe. It really does help the show. Another way to support us is to answer a short survey at yourwellnessacademy.co.uk/survey and tell us what wellness topics you'd like to hear about. I'm your host, Dan Ball. Our producer is Scott Towns, created by our executive producer, Ben Heathcote, for Wellness Academy.